I want to show you guys how to go from this to this to this, how this is pink, and why it's such a huge time saver. But first, a little backstory. This house was built in 1974. My parents moved here in September, 3 months before I was born. This room was my sister's room, and these walls have been abused. Lots of posters and pictures tacked and screwed everywhere. The walls were never properly fixed, so there's a lot of problems. Our plan is to turn this into an office. This series will include fixing these terrible walls, new trim, new floors, new paint, doing away with this closet, and the series will end with a floating wall-to-wall desk that is going to be awesome. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you don't miss anything. The first thing that has to go is a carpet. I'm just going to cut it in a strip so that I can carry it out by myself. Now, HGTV loves to tell you how fun demo day is, but they are liars. Basically, you do about an hour's worth of work, and the rest of your day is spent cleaning and taking out the trash. That is not fun to me at all. Make sure to cut the caulk with a good razor knife. If you don't, you will rip out huge chunks of sheetrock. And notice how I'm pulling this pry bar in the direction of the trim. If you try to pull up in the opposite direction, you will knock a hole in your wall. And that also helps you get the trim off in one piece. The demo is done and everything is clean. So I'm going to leave the blinds up for now just because the sunlight will mess up the video. And also this acoustical ceiling or popcorn ceiling, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to leave it up. Typically I would take it down, but I'm going to be doing all my voiceovers in this room, and it'll actually cut down the echo a little bit. So this random orbital sander works well for the really bad spots. Just be cautious using any type of electrical sander on sheetrock because you can cause yourself even more work if you oversand. So this is a very important step that most people tend to overlook. Sanding will let your joint compound stick better, your primer stick better, and make any high spots that need to be addressed easier to find. A lot of times when you pull a nail out of sheetrock, a little bit of the paper will stick out with it. So I'll take a hammer and just tap it in a little bit. Makes it a lot easier to fix. So there's two types of sheetrock tape. There's this mesh tape, and there's also a paper tape. This mesh tape is self-adhesive and it works a lot better for patching holes or cracks. For my first coat of joint compound or sheetrock mud, whatever you want to call it, I'm just going to put a thin layer on all of the really bad spots. For whatever reason, I didn't video this, but you want to thin your joint compound down with water. Just get an extra bucket and a mixer, make it just thick enough to where it will stay on your trowel without falling off. Be very careful not to put this on too thick. It's a lot easier to add more than it is to sand off too much. As you can see, these walls were in very bad shape. The first coat went up good. Just walk away, come back the next day after it's dry, start again. When you're applying this joint compound, you get these little lines where it actually kind of squeezes out the sides of your trowel. Don't worry about it then. Wait till it's dry, scrape them off, save you a lot of trouble. If you do a good job with your first coat, all you have to do is scrape it. You do not have to sand it, and you can move on to your second coat. When you paint a wall, the wall will actually pick up a little texture from the roller. And if you only fix the bad spots and then paint, those spots that you fixed will be noticeable. And when you have a wall that's been painted as many times as this has and has a thick texture, your wall will look terrible if you paint it. So the only choice that I had was to thin coat the entire walls so that the texture will be consistent and look better. I'm not going to do anything to the closet because I have different plans for it later. Once it's dry, just go through and scrape off all your lines, and then you're ready to sand. I know this looks a little uneven, but that's okay because I want a little distance around any of the bad spots. But the spots that aren't bad, all I want to do is smooth out the texture. So this is perfectly fine. I cannot stress to you guys enough how important it is to be cautious and careful when you're putting the joint compound up. Taking a few extra minutes to put it up smooth and thin will save you hours in sanding. So unless you just absolutely love sanding, pay very close attention to what you're doing. I like to use these sanding blocks for all the places that the big disc won't fit, like your corners or around the top or trim or whatever. The medium grit works best for me, but just be careful with you use it because it can get away from you a little bit. And you can pick these up at any big box store. Joint compound will get these little air bubbles, and those air bubbles will open up into pinholes when sanded. Those pinholes will then be filled with the dust. If you don't clean your walls properly, you will never see those pinholes until you paint, and then it's too late. Once your walls are clean, you want to go over every inch and mark any spot that needs more attention, whether it be more sanding or more joint compound. And you want to feel it. Don't just look at it, because spots that you can't see now, you will see once it's painted. Oh, and use a pencil, not a pen, because ink is actually kind of hard to cover. Don't ask me how I know that. For my last coat, I'm just going to mix up some of this 20-minute mud. Now, it'll dry a lot faster, but I don't like using it on the first coat because it actually dries quite a bit harder and takes longer to sand. And now for the tip of the day, chalk dust. Add a little chalk dust to your joint compound before your final spot coat. This will make it very easy to see what needs to be sanded. Once I had to rework an entire wall because of a spot the size of the palm of your hand that I missed until after the wall was painted. And this is the consistency that I was talking about earlier. It's just thick enough to stay on the trowel. It's kind of like warm butter. And the same as before, the thinner the coat, the less sanding. Be careful when sanding this coat not to over sand your last coat, or else you'll be in this continuous loop of adding and sanding over and over and over. Once that last coat is sanded and your walls are clean, you'll want to find and fix any remaining issues. I like to use a product called Fast and Final, but I don't have any. I'm 30 miles away from the closest place to buy any, so I'm using this Drydex because this is what I have on hand. Once that is dry and sanded, you only have one more step before you can prime, and that is caulking the corners. I'll get much deeper into caulk on the next video, but for now all I'll say is less is more, be as neat as possible, and cutting your tip at an angle will make your life much easier. Once the caulk is dry, you're ready to prime. I'm going to be painting the ceiling and adding crown mold, so I'm not even going to attempt to get a good line here. I'll get into the techniques of painting in the next video, but for now just remember that anything that you do wrong with the primer will be magnified with the paint. So make sure that everything that you do is smooth and neat with no runs and no lines. So guys, these walls turned out great. I'm very, very, very happy with the way they look. It was a tremendous amount of work, but it was completely worth it. Every time I walk into this room, I'll know that I did this. And isn't that kind of the point of all of this? So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next video in this series. Thanks for watching.